Becky Lynch. She's one of the greatest women in the history of WWE, and there is no shadow of doubt behind that. Her run from the summer of 2018 only up until recently is arguably the greatest of any woman in the history of the business. But it hasn't always been that successful. She wasn't always the top dog that she's been recently. She wasn't always the highest paid superstar, but she scratched and clawed and went through triumphs in and out of the ring to achieve the successful position that she has gained. But only 6 years ago, it seemed like that may have never happened. The highly demanding challenges of professional wrestling at the highest level, and just the ups and downs of life outside of it, have all been obstacles in the way of Becky Lynch. So how did Becky Lynch overcome all of this to become the biggest female superstar in the history of WWE? We'll get into all of it. This is Sportskeeda Wrestling. I'm Kevin Callum. Let us know what you think in the comments below.
Stand back. There's a new wrestling quiz coming through. Check out BrainBuster, the daily quiz that tests your WWE knowledge with winning streaks, stats, and more. It's time to see if you're up for the challenge.
Rebecca Quinn's pro wrestling path started in her native country of Ireland, training under Paul Tracy and Fergal Devitt, who most of the wrestling world now knows as Finn Balor. Her first match was still at the ripe, impressionable age of 15. She lied about her age to get into the wrestling school. Grinding across the independent circuit, which had a burgeoning class of female talent in the mid-2000s, she would find her way facing other future WWE names and promotions like Shimmer Women's Athletes. But it would abruptly come to a crossroads following serious injuries, and she would decide to leave wrestling behind in 2006. Leaving wrestling behind wasn't easy, and she would struggle with mental health, but her dreams of success outside of Ireland would not cease. She reportedly chose another path outside of wrestling that found her waitressing in bars in New York City, places that she described like the TV show Cheers, and studying at the famed Columbia College in Chicago in acting. I also went to that school. She found her way into stunt doubling work and even took on a role as a flight attendant for more than 2 years, and maybe that worldwide travel got her itching to get on the path of wrestling once more. At the age of 25, she would have her WWE tryout and would get signed under UK wrestling luminary Robbie Brookside. Still fighting her way in the even thick ranks of NXT in the early 2010s and in a hyper-challenging environment, she was nearly let go, but legendary figure, a figure who has influenced a generation of wrestling greats, Dusty Rhodes, who oversaw NXT at the time, encouraged her to fight on. WWE NXT was Triple H's baby, and the entire NXT crew at the time was a collective, truly burning level of talent, and it matched up with the progressive movement within the women's division to simply not just have attractive people on screen, but women who could perform on par with the men, emphasizing their abilities and depth of character as performers over simply just good looks. The early goings of the women's revolution in the 2010s aligned with Becky Lynch's rise in NXT. Soon, WWE fans started to pair her rise with that of 3 other pivotal figures in the changing tides of professional wrestling. The 4 horsewomen, as they would be known, would also include Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks, Bayley, and of course, Becky Lynch. They were the standouts. They were the reason that everyone had a different feeling, a different perception of what women were going to do in pro wrestling then, now, and forever. And for those that have hopped on the wrestling train in the past couple of years, we cannot stress enough how much of a seismic shift this time was. It was quite prophetic in hindsight. In NXT around this time, Charlotte Flair and Banks were the ones that were really given the big push, both winning NXT Women's Championships and dominating the title picture between May of 2014 and August of 2015. Bayley's story was more of a slow-burning build-up because of her underdog character, so there was a lot of time to get that big payoff. But for Becky Lynch, her misfortune of being in NXT at the same time as these other people simply just meant that maybe she was being overshadowed. Her defining moment in NXT came in a title match against the boss, Sasha Banks, where she lost but received a huge ovation from the crowd at Full Sail University in Florida. Looking back at it, the fans were singing her theme song in respect, admiring her spark for the fire that would become the superstar she would grow to be in the future. Becky Lynch received her main roster call-up in WWE without having an NXT Women's Championship run. Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, and Charlotte Flair would all debut on the main roster at the same time, under the same circumstances, just as the Divas era was really entering its final stages. Bayley was then slotted into the top spot at NXT, becoming the women's champion and the most popular one at that. As for Becky Lynch, the issues presented themselves right off the bat in the main roster run. The hierarchy wasn't clear right away, but still, Charlotte Flair was at the top, Sasha Banks was a close second, and Becky Lynch felt like a distant third. Charlotte was getting the big push, becoming Divas champion quickly. Sasha was having a popular run on the rise in late 2015 into 2016. It didn't help Becky was consistently presented as Charlotte Flair's lackey, for rather of a better term, and not really her own individual person. At WrestleMania 32, 3 of the 4 women competed in the inaugural WWE Women's Championship, later referred to as the Raw Women's Championship, and they stole the show. Becky Lynch was on the biggest wrestling show you could be, along with women having a match that, as we mentioned, stole the show. That's right, it was better than Roman Reigns in the main event by a wide margin. It was the highest attended wrestling event in history at the time or so, and the women had the match of the night. This definitely helped every woman in WWE, and Becky Lynch was a part of pushing through that door. Charlotte Flair won the match, Becky Lynch tapped out, unfortunately, and Sasha Banks was being held back by Ric Flair. It was a crazy situation, but no matter what, all 3 superstars were elevated. Probably a perfect representation of how WWE ranked those 3 superstars. Both Banks and Flair would go on to be drafted to Raw that summer and feud for the Raw Women's Championship, while Becky Lynch was given a huge breakout spot of her own. In 2016, the brand split was reintroduced. Becky Lynch was picked as the top female superstar on SmackDown, along with a very small roster who competed for the SmackDown Women's Championship. Maybe Lynch's time as a supporting character had come to a close. For the first time in her career, Becky Lynch finally found herself in a role where she wasn't being overshadowed by someone else, and deservingly she became the first SmackDown Women's Champion. It felt like her time had finally arrived. But that, unfortunately, was not the complete story. In reality, she was given that feel-good moment, but a fleeting one, because the intention was always to establish Alexa Bliss, yes, Twisted Miss Bliss, as maybe the next big thing in WWE. Thus, Becky Lynch was given a relatively short transitional title reign. Introduce the title, get it going, and in just 84 days, Alexa Bliss dethroned her. In 2017, the SmackDown Women's Championship story mainly was between Naomi and Alexa Bliss. So even though Becky Lynch participated in the women's title match for the second year in a row at WrestleMania 33, she was nothing more than a background figure, as Naomi was in her glow and had the big moment made for her. 2017 proved to be a pretty underwhelming year for Becky Lynch. She found herself falling short in the Money in the Bank briefcase inaugural match for the women that was won by Carmella. And after becoming a SmackDown team captain at Survivor Series, still respected, she was the first woman in the match to be eliminated, which was a clear-cut sign of where she stood in the pecking order of WWE at the time. But even still, Becky Lynch was proving to be an extremely reliable yet resistant name for WWE to call upon in a specific role. It never hurts to have a utility player, and if Becky Lynch was going to be that, she was going to run with it. She had fallen down the totem pole a bit, obviously, with Alexa Bliss and Carmella being given more of a spotlight than her. Thankfully, her workhorse mentality was proving that she could not go unnoticed. Starting in 2018, Becky Lynch began quietly picking up a little bit of a winning streak. And at WrestleMania 34, she was a background figure in an unimportant women's battle royal. But soon after, the fortunes for her would soon change. Carmella may have been money at the time, but yeah, the cheetah-printed superstar may have been top dog on SmackDown following WrestleMania 34, but Becky was picking up some serious steam, even having maybe more momentum than Charlotte Flair right around this time. Charlotte Flair, by the way, was, starting to already have that Hall of Fame run, but the tides were turning. Even fans and higher-ups within WWE were starting to notice. The most tried and tested true way of building a superstar up is by giving them a string of momentum-building victories, getting fans invested in them over a long period of time. But would the payoff come? Legends like the Nature Boy Ric Flair, Brock Lesnar, and AJ Styles, who just walked into WWE, won the WWE Championship in months as outliers of the active scene. For Becky Lynch, who was, even though an active participant, considered an outsider at that main event level, this approach proved effective. She found herself competing for the SmackDown Women's Championship at SummerSlam against Carmella. Unsurprisingly, though, Charlotte Flair was immediately thrown into that mix, reminding Becky Lynch of the fact that her best friend, yes, the blonde bombshell, was always going to be at the top and constantly put her in a shadow. It reminded Becky Lynch of the shortcomings she faced in her career time and time again. Fans were ready to see Becky have her moment, unfiltered, unfleeting, and have it really be something special, only for her to get pinned by Charlotte Flair, who regained the SmackDown Women's Championship. We know many of you are screaming, "She's a Nepo baby, it's nepotism only because she's Ric Flair's daughter." Stop it. She's still Charlotte Flair, one of the best wrestlers in the world. We can make a different video about that. It looked like it was an embrace of the two best friends after the match, but this was a moment that changed it all and altered the course of wrestling history and both characters in the eyes of many wrestling fans. In one sense, it was great that Becky Lynch finally broke out of being that character who is just off on the side, happy to be someone's friend and see them have success, even at their own expense. She officially turned into the man before we even knew it. WWE tried hard to make fans boo her, but they loved what they were getting from Becky Lynch. She would cut these promos about how you never supported me, you the fans, while these same arenas filled with fans were cheering her on for simply disrupting the system. At this point, she was getting louder reactions than anyone else in WWE. It felt like it came out of nowhere, but was always there, waiting in the wings to be turned on. And Becky Lynch was very on with WWE fans. She even got positive responses when getting berated by loved legends like Edge. It didn't take long for WWE to know that they had to pull the trigger and revert to being a good guy with this now rebellious Becky Lynch. During a subsequent feud with Charlotte, she finally beat her and became the SmackDown Women's Champion again. It was off to the races from there. Lynch would gain even more validation as the women's champion on SmackDown, defeating Charlotte again in a stadium show-off in Australia at the WWE Super Showdown. Lynch and Charlotte Flair, though, would meet in one of the most important matches then in the rising women's evolution. The culmination of it all, they would be on the first all-women's premium live event, Evolution. Lynch and Flair would have one of the best matches on that very historic show, having a last women's standing match for the WWE Women's SmackDown title. It would gain 4 3/4 stars from the Wrestling Observer, and clearly was better than the main event with Ronda Rousey and Nikki Bella. Her next big hurdle lie at Survivor Series, where someone with a bad attitude would meet someone with a bad reputation, or at least that was the good idea at the time. A year after being the first woman out of 10 to be eliminated, she was now the most highly anticipated match on the card. It was champion versus champion, with Becky Lynch defending the SmackDown Women's Championship against the Raw Women's Champion, the UFC invader of WWE, Ronda Rousey. It's important to know the context of everything leading up to this match. While Becky Lynch was wreaking havoc over on the Blue brand, Ronda Rousey was dominating Monday Night Raw, becoming a women's champion after wrestling only a few matches, but certainly having the legitimate credibility of a former UFC champion. She was red hot and improving rapidly. There were rumors going around in 2018 that WWE was planning on having the first ever women's main event at WrestleMania 35. And the plan at that point was supposedly to see Ronda Rousey go up against the Queen, Charlotte Flair. But boy, oh boy, did Becky Lynch completely change all of those plans. In the build-up to Survivor Series, Becky Lynch's team on SmackDown invaded Monday Night Raw with their blue shirts and beating up everyone on the red brand, leading to a big brawl in the ring. The formidable and not like most girls, Nia Jax, legitimately struck Becky Lynch in the fist-flying fracas and busted her face wide open, giving her a bloody, nose-crushing concussion in what undoubtedly was one of the most iconic images and moments in Raw of the 2010s. Becky Lynch stood above the audience with a crimson mask of blood flowing, her arms spread wide in resilient victory after the entire brawl. But fans didn't know is Becky Lynch didn't even remember the entire thing. The bad news broke out the next day when it was revealed that Becky Lynch was indeed injured from that concussion, obviously, and would be forced to pull out of her Survivor Series dream match against Rousey. In her place was Charlotte Flair, a decision that was met with a very mixed and emotional response. WWE's alleged WrestleMania 35 main event plan was now happening at Survivor Series, and Becky Lynch was still riding high on that momentum even though she was injured and on the shelf. Flair and Rousey would put on a very, very strong match that many people tend to forget because of their biases towards other figures in WWE, and they could still put on Charlotte and Rousey at the main event of WrestleMania if they added someone to the match. The plan was put into motion. Becky Lynch, defending the women's title of SmackDown, would enter the hardcore fray of a tables, ladders, and chairs match against, who else? Charlotte Flair. But now we have the Empress of Tomorrow, Asuka, in the mix at the Tables, Ladders, and Chairs premium live event in 2018. They would close out the show in a match that was rated by CageMatch.net at 8.6 out of 10. A match that was so good, it went on after Dean Ambrose versus Rollins, Daniel Bryan versus AJ Styles. Yeah, this was truly a sign of how Lynch, Flair, and others were changing the guard in WWE. It also helped them set up some things down the road, on the road, for WrestleMania. All three women proved why they deserved the spot, and it was another big feather in the cap of Becky Lynch despite her losing the title. At 2019's Royal Rumble, she was still riding all of that fan support. But out of nowhere, a questionable thing happened. She lost to Asuka. It was a banger of a championship match. She was pursuing the title, but she lost to Asuka and tapped out to Asuka. Yeah, this was Becky Lynch in 2019. She was supposed to roar into WrestleMania, but later that night during the Women's Royal Rumble, we would reboot this whole thing. The ravishing Russian Lana was supposed to enter, but she couldn't walk after Rusev accidentally toppled her from a ring apron in a U.S. title match. Becky Lynch came out and took her spot in the entrance. And someone who had ushered the women's revolution of WWE, producer Fit Finlay, was now the one who gave her the cue to enter the Women's Royal Rumble match with a crowd of 48,000 people going wild. They thought the man was out of the Mania mix, but now here she was right back in it. After the fiery Lynch used her brains to eliminate the much larger Nia Jax, it was down to her and a familiar face in the final moments of that Women's Royal Rumble. The winner would go on to WrestleMania, and she would meet a familiar foe, Charlotte Flair. If it wasn't enough that Becky Lynch wrestled 17 minutes earlier that night and a further 10 now in the arduous Royal Rumble, she had another big bit of an adversary thrown her way. Nia Jax attacked her following the elimination, weakening Becky Lynch's knee, making it easy pickings for the figure four applying Charlotte Flair. But like she did many times before, Becky overcame the odds and became the second Women's Royal Rumble winner to a massive ovation. Becky Lynch, in the eyes of the diehards that had always been with her, but now in the eyes of even casual fans, had truly arrived. And what a better time than to do it right before WrestleMania. During the WrestleMania 35 Road to season, she was the center of the most important story in WWE by far, the other being the rivalry on the Raw side, while Kofi Mania was raging over on SmackDown. Becky had already declared that she would pursue Ronda Rousey for the Raw Women's Championship, but once again, Charlotte managed to enter the picture and things escalated quickly. Becky, not happy about this, found herself challenging the authority of WWE, having face-offs with the corporate overlord Triple H, and being the one who had to face the biggest hurdles in front of her before truly securing an unfiltered ticket to WrestleMania. Charlotte Flair, meanwhile, though, dethroned Asuka in March of that year, which meant this was now going to be a triple threat at WrestleMania, which would be for both the Raw and SmackDown Women's Championships in a winner-take-all triple threat match. Becky was the only one who wasn't a champion in that match. But she walked into that match, which went on really late and one of the longest WrestleManias of all time, and she walked out as a double champion, or Becky Two Belts, as she would be referred to. It was truly the pinnacle of her career, a breakthrough moment for women's professional wrestling, and a breakthrough moment for women in sports overall. Even as she went on to do other things and win more championships, there's only one time you get to be in the first all-women's main event at WrestleMania, and only one person gets to win that. And that person forever will be recognized as Becky Lynch. It is the greatest achievement of any wrestler's career in just being a world champion, let alone headlining the grandest stage of them all and winning at it. Becky Lynch, once overlooked, once always in the shadow of someone perceived to be more popular than her, became one of the industry's biggest stars 17 years after her journey in professional wrestling began. Her story, her connection to the fans, is probably the biggest reason she made it to that level. Even when Becky Lynch was maybe the fourth most important horsewoman in NXT, when she was perceived as a lackey to Charlotte Flair, when she was maybe perceived as less popular than Sasha Banks, fans always recognized that she deserved more. And her connection and authenticity were the thing that truly won in the end. It's the perfect example of what it's meant to be. Macho Man once said that the cream always rises to the top. And oh yeah, did it rise to the top with the man. Becky Lynch had the most relatable story, the most relatable character to the average fan, and it only took a few months to kickstart the greatest rise of any woman that WWE has ever presented. But before those few months, it took 17 years of her life to get there. The moment lightning struck, she took the ball and ran with it. Becky Lynch grew a louder and louder reaction everywhere she went, and her popularity spread like wildfire. Even after WrestleMania 35, the man didn't hold on to the double titles for long, but she still went on to hold the Raw Women's Championship for a year before vacating the title to become a mother. And a very emotional scene on Monday Night Raw, maybe one of the best scenes WWE did during those no-fans pandemic days. She came back 15 months later in 2021, and she was in a questionable position by beating the new top rising star in Bianca Belair in 26 seconds to become the SmackDown Women's Champion. It was abrupt and questionable, but this was still Becky Lynch. In her book, Becky Lynch, the Man, Not Your Average Girl, she revealed that Bianca Belair was in tears backstage after their match at SummerSlam. By this point, Becky Lynch was reportedly the highest paid female star in WWE and was among the highest paid talents in all of WWE, regardless of gender, meaning that she had some really heavy backstage sway. She said in her book that she used that backstage influence to make sure that the end goal of her title reign in 2021-2022 was to elevate the EST Bianca Belair. Surely enough, we got the most satisfying end of that story at WrestleMania 38 in Texas, when Belair got her revenge in a weekend-stealing bout between the two. The best part of it was when even we got Becky Lynch expanding her horizons, becoming an amazing bad guy in big-time Bex. Fans genuinely disliked her, and she made a new hero in the process. She was truly at another creative level in her career. In 2023, she took a step back from the main event scene and became a women's tag team champion with Lita and feuded with Trish for a few months. When Becky Lynch went back to NXT to give it even more back to the business, she wasn't going to do it without getting some gold. A title that had eluded her early in her career was now going to be around her waist with the WWE NXT Women's Championship. It felt a bit odd, but it was almost like she was being given the title solely because she had never won it before. But truly, it was to elevate other people in the process. Regardless, it gave her the status of being the sixth woman to be a Grand Slam champion in WWE. Even then, she proved to be a great asset, helping stars on NXT's roster become even bigger, and made one in the process in Lyra Valkyria. The younger Irish protege would get a profound victory over Lynch at NXT Halloween Havoc. Lynch was proving that she was doing best for the business in a way that would maybe not even be noticeable to us now, maybe in the future. A few months after giving Nia Jax what some believe was the best match of her career and losing to her, Becky Lynch went on to face the dominant women's champion Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania 40. She lost, she gave a valiant effort, and Rhea Ripley had the biggest win of her career. Do you see a pattern here? After Rhea Ripley had to vacate the title due to an injury, fans questioned the decision to have Becky Lynch become the Women's World Champion. But why is that questionable? Instantly, Becky Hogan memes came out implying that she used her backstage influence to become champion. But this is really surface-level speculation from people that aren't trying that hard, and the critics were shut up pretty quickly when Becky Lynch lost the title to another young up-and-comer, Liv Morgan, proving that Becky Lynch was the star maker of WWE. Becky Lynch is at the top, but is still making stars in the process. You notice we haven't said that Becky Lynch is buried? No, she's at the top, bringing people up to her level. That's how important she is. That's how much she's done for the business. Yes, reportedly at this time, she is without a contract to WWE as far as we know, and is considered a free agent within the wrestling landscape. Many don't expect her to do anything in pro wrestling outside of WWE. Certainly she has the capabilities of doing a lot of things in the world of entertainment. She's dabbled in acting here and there. Who knows? But we have to recognize that Becky Lynch is without a shadow of a doubt one of the biggest game-changing figures in the history of professional wrestling. In this big breakout period that we've seen now truly fold over for women in WWE, she was leading the charge. Still, we leave this video with the question simply, when will the man come around again? Do you want to see Becky Lynch come back to WWE? If so, why don't you get down there in the comments and fantasy book a return for her? What would you have her do? Let us know. Thank you for watching.